the sitter. The sound began as a vibration, a low hum in the floorboards that Alistair felt in his teeth before he heard it. Then came the scrape. It was a dry, grating noise, the sound of rough ceramic being dragged across polished hardwood. It was the sound of a thing that should not be moving. Scrape. Paralysis was a familiar poison. It seeped into him from the mattress up, a leaden tide that filled his limbs and turned his muscles to stone. His eyes, wide and unblinking in the pre-dawn gloom, were the only part of him that could move. They darted frantically around the room, seeking the source of the sound, though he already knew. He was screaming, but the sound was trapped behind a wall of concrete in his throat, a silent, frantic howl that beat against the inside of his skull. Scrape, scrape. There. A squat, hunched silhouette detaching itself from the deeper shadows by the door. The garden gnome. Its pointed cap was a dark triangle against the gray wash of the window. It was halfway across the room now, its painted-on smile a fixed, cheerful gash in the darkness. Each scrape was a deliberate, measured drag, a step closer to his bed. Alistair's heart hammered a wild, useless rhythm against his ribs. He fought, he strained, he threw every ounce of his will against the suffocating weight, but it was like trying to punch his way out of a dream. He was a statue of terror forced to bear witness. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. With a final, silent shudder, the weight lifted. Air flooded his lungs in a ragged gasp. He jackknifed it into a sitting position, drenched in cold sweat, his wild eyes scanning an empty room. Nothing. The space by the door was just a space. The floor was clear. There was only the oppressive silence and the blue-black square of the window heralding a day he did not want. Morning found Alistair a different man. In the sterile, minimalist expanse of his condo, he moved with the precision of a surgeon. The gray suit was perfectly pressed, the tie knotted with an exactitude that bordered on obsessive. He measured his coffee beans on a digital scale. Every object in his home had its place. Every surface was a testament to order, a stark, controlled environment that betrayed no hint of the nightly chaos. By the time he stepped into his office, the transformation was complete. The room was a soft, quiet space of muted earth tones and gentle lighting. Here, Alistair was a pillar of calm. His voice was a low, soothing instrument, his empathy a finely honed tool. "The anger you feel," he said to the woman weeping softly in the leather armchair opposite him, "is not a betrayal of your love for him. It's a part of it. It's the raw, ragged edge of grief." He guided her through her pain with profound skill, offering anchors of understanding in her sea of loss. He was a cartographer of sorrow, charting paths for others through the very wilderness he refused to enter himself. The contrast was a silent, screaming chasm. He was the master of a language he could no longer speak, the guide to a land from which he was a permanent exile. The dissonance was becoming unbearable. The creature of the night and the man of the day could not coexist in the same skin. A physical totem, he reasoned, must be the source. A lightning rod for the storm in his mind. If he could destroy the object, he could destroy the manifestation. He found it in the garden, or what passed for one. Beyond his pristine patio was a riot of neglect, a tangled, overgrown patch of earth he hadn't touched in years. Weeds choked forgotten rose bushes, their thorns like rusty wire. And there, half swallowed by a clump of dandelions, was the gnome. In the daylight, it was absurd. A cheap, cheerful thing of garishly painted ceramic. Its rosy cheeks were chipped, its blue eyes vacant and stupid. It felt obscene, this happy little caricature presiding over such decay. A desperate rage, cold and sharp, seized Alistair. This was it. The root. He retrieved a spade from the garage. The first blow shattered the gnome's smiling face, the crack of ceramic unnaturally loud in the quiet afternoon. He brought the spade down again and again, a frantic, hammering release, until the cheerful figure was nothing but a pile of brightly colored shards. He wasn't done. He gathered the pieces, dumped them into a metal bucket, doused them in lighter fluid, and struck a match. The acrid smell of burning paint filled the air, a foul incense for his exorcism. As he watched the flames lick at the fragments, a profound sense of relief washed over him. He had taken control. He had fought back. That night, for the first time in weeks, he went to bed with a fragile flicker of hope. The paralysis hit him like a dropped curtain. It was heavier this time, quicker. His eyes flew open to the darkness, his heart already galloping. Scrape. It was there. It stood where it had been the night before, halfway across the room. And as he watched, frozen in a fresh hell of despair, it took another deliberate, scraping step closer. It had never been about the object in the garden. It had never followed the rules of the world he understood. Elias was a raw nerve. He sat hunched in the client chair, a big man made small by his grief. His hands, thick and calloused, twisted a damp tissue into a shredded pulp. It was the gate, he rasped, his voice thick with unshed tears. I was supposed to fix the latch on the pool gate. I told her I would. I just got busy. He looked up, his eyes swimming in a guilt so profound it felt like a physical presence in the room. She was only 4. She just wanted her ball. He spoke the words Alistair had spent years burying under layers of professional detachment and sterile minimalism. It was my fault. I looked away, just for a second. Each of Elias's raw, self-lacerating confessions was a spadeful of dirt tossed onto Alistair's own carefully constructed tomb. The session was almost unbearable. Alistair could feel his composure, his therapeutic mask, growing thin and brittle, threatening to crack. He felt like a fraud, a hollow man offering empty comforts. That night, the paralysis was immediate. The gnome was no longer in the middle of the room. It stood at the foot of his bed. Its painted smile, which had once seemed vacant, now seemed to mock him with a kind of intimate knowledge. Its empty eyes were fixed on him. The terror was no longer a distant threat. It was a guest in his most private space. He could feel its vacant stare like a pressure on his skin, a silent, knowing judgment. It was beside the bed. The scraping had stopped. Silence had fallen, thick and suffocating. Alistair lay pinned to the mattress, his breath a prisoner in his chest. The gnome stood motionless, its pointed head barely reaching the top of the nightstand. He could see the peeling paint on its beard, the dark, hollow chips of its eyes. It was so close, so real. His mind was a hurricane. Please. No. Go away. Please just go away. He pleaded with a god he didn't believe in, with the entity itself, with the silent, unfeeling walls of his room. Then, with an agonizing slowness, the gnome raised its little ceramic arm. It reached for him. Time stretched, thinned to a transparent strand. The small, painted hand moved through the inches separating them, an inch per century. Alistair's silent scream reached a fever pitch. The cold, painted ceramic touched his cheek. The sensation was electric. A shock of ice and profound, soul-deep loss. It wasn't just cold. It was the cold of the grave, the cold of absolute finality. It was a touch that stripped away every defense, every lie he had ever told himself. He awoke with a choked gasp, scrambling away from the edge of the bed until his back hit the headboard. The room was empty. Sunlight was just beginning to bleed through the blinds. He scrambled to the bathroom, his heart a wild bird battering his ribs. He stared into the mirror, his face pale and slick with sweat. There was no mark, but he could feel it. A distinct, perfectly circular spot of cold on his right cheek. A phantom touch that would not fade. Later that day, Elias was speaking, his voice a low murmur of pain, but Alistair wasn't listening. His gaze was fixed on the window behind his client. In the reflection of the glass, distorted and faint. He saw it, the silhouette of a pointed hat, a stout, hunched body. It was standing behind him. He recoiled with a strangled noise, jerking back in his chair. "Doctor," Elias asked, his own grief-stricken face startled into concern. "Are you all right?" Alistair stared at the window. The reflection was gone. But he knew. The barrier was broken. The thing from the night had followed him into the day. He could no longer contain this. He could no longer pretend. He ended the session early, citing a sudden illness. He canceled the rest of his appointments for the week. His hands shaking, he found the number he'd been given at a conference years ago. "Dr. Petrova? My name is Alistair Finch. I'm a colleague. I need your help." The coffee shop was an assault of warmth and noise. The hiss of the espresso machine, the clatter of ceramic, the low hum of conversation, it was the antithesis of the crushing silence of Alistair's home, and for that, he was grateful. Dr. Lena Petrova was sharp, her eyes a startlingly clear blue. She had a way of listening that felt both empathetic and analytical, a pragmatism that Alistair found deeply soothing. He told her everything, the words tumbling out in a rush, the scraping, the paralysis, the smashed gnome, the cold touch. He expected disbelief, but Lena just nodded, sipping her latte. "It's a classic, if severe, case of sleep paralysis with associated hypnagogic hallucinations," she said, her voice calm and even. The clinical terminology was a balm, a lifeline of logic. The figure of the gnome is what we call a persistent intruder hallucination. Your mind, under extreme stress and likely dealing with unresolved trauma, has created a focal point for your anxiety. It's not real, Alistair. It's a projection. She explained the science, the way the brain can wake up before the body, trapping the conscious mind in an immobilized state. The terror, she said, triggers a fight or flight response that has nowhere to go, amplifying hallucinations. "We need to break the cycle," she concluded. She wrote a prescription for a mild sedative. "This should help you achieve a deeper, less anxious sleep. And I want you to record yourself. Set up a camera. The goal is to demystify this. When you see the recording in the morning, just you, alone in your room, it will help your rational mind regain control over the primal fear." Alistair left the coffee shop, clutching the prescription like a holy relic. He felt armed. He had a plan. He had science, his shield against the shadows. For the first time, he felt a fragile, tentative sense of hope. Setting up the camera felt absurd. He positioned the tripod in the corner of his bedroom, the little black lens a single, unblinking eye aimed at his bed. It felt like a violation, a sterile witness to his most private terror. He took the sedative as prescribed. It dragged him down into a heavy, dreamless state, a thick, dreamless fog that was a profound respite. There were no scrapes, no paralysis, no hunched figures in the gloom. He woke feeling groggy and hungover, the world muted and slow. But the cold spot on his cheek was still there, a faint but persistent reminder that a dreamless sleep was not a cure. He avoided the camera all day. It sat in the corner, a silent accusation. He was afraid of what it might show, but he was more afraid of what it wouldn't.